Hello and welcome to this week's video of Making Food History. It is time to drop the C word. Capitalism is a word that makes a world of difference when it comes to modern agriculture and actually mirrors how modern agriculture is a break with agriculture as we have known it, well, since the Neolithic Revolution. For many centuries, there was a clear goal for everyone who was involved in agriculture. It was about feeding the people who worked the land. Of course, there was market production of various sizes, but that was usually a secondary task. The first task was to make sure that basic needs of those who did farming were met. And that framed the choices of plants, that framed cultivation methods, and that framed, not least of all, the goals of farming. Today's farming is all about maximizing profit. Before capitalist agriculture, it was all about feeding the stomachs of those. And there was a natural limit to agriculture, unlike today where capitalist agriculture has no natural limit. There is no limit to the greed that is okay in today's farming. Pre-modern farmers were worried about starving to death. Modern farmers are worried about bankruptcy. So the word capitalism makes for a set of contrasts, but of course that by itself doesn't really explain why we moved towards a capitalist system of agriculture. And there is a discussion over whether we probably need concepts that explain this transition. Well, the book we discussed in our research group this week, Sven Beckert's The Empire of Cotton, makes a proposal of what such a concept could be like. The Empire of Cotton is a magistral overview of the making of the modern cotton business and the making of modern capitalism. And it challenges our understanding of what the modern textile business, the modern textile industry is about. No, it's not something that has to do with Lancashire, about new methods of spinning and weaving on an industrial scale. Yes, that is a part of the story, but ultimately just one element of a much bigger story, a new economic regime that Sven Beckert has called war capitalism. The charm of the concept of war capitalism is that it includes different lines of events. For one, it makes clear that before spinning and weaving turned industrial in Lancashire, there was a disruption of the traditional networks of cotton. Cotton has been cultivated for textiles for many, many centuries. There was one clear hub of cotton production in the world before the 1770s, and that was India. And a very big part of war capitalism was disrupting and ultimately destroying these traditional cotton trades through military power and the powers of the colonial state. There was imperial expansion, the expropriation of land where cotton could be planted, how the entire project of war capitalism hinged on that underrated institution of the modern world, the land title that gave individuals a license to exploit the land for whatever they deemed fit. And war capitalism was about something else, namely slavery. Sven Beckert goes to great length and goes into painstaking details to make clear that the new plantations that grew first in the Caribbean and then the American South are a departure from many centuries of cotton cultivation. Before that break in the world of cotton was planted by farmers, peasants, smallholders. It was usually planted along with, as one of several crops. The book opens with a scene on the Pacific coast of what is today Mexico, 500 years ago, where cotton was planted along with beans and squash and maize, and that is the routine that you find around the world. Cotton was planted as part of a much bigger portfolio. Against this background, it becomes clear what the new thing is about the cotton plantations as they grew since the late 18th century. They were way bigger than anything a single peasant could have cultivated. They were single-minded in their devotion to that one and only crop, cotton, and they used unfree labor on an unprecedented scale. And I don't think I need to elaborate at great length in this video. You are all aware, I very much hope, of transatlantic slavery, the inherent violence, the inherently inhumanitarian character of this production regime. And I'm sure you realize that the violence that is endemic in transatlantic slavery does not end with the abolition of slavery in the wake of the US Civil War. It is something that frames life in and beyond the Deep South to this day. So Becker's book shows something that is, I think, crucial for the modern global history schools, namely this ability to connect things that we previously thought about as separate events. Yes, there is Lancashire, there is spinning and weaving by industrial technology, but there's also the navies that allow disruption of pre-existing trade networks. There is the European concept of land ownership, and yes, there is slavery. You cannot be a part of the new modern network of cotton without being accomplice in slavery. This is the concept that we discussed in our research group this week, and we were very sympathetic to this approach. There's much that speaks for connecting these dots and telling the story of cotton as a global story in different parts. But there's a risk involved here. When you talk about war capitalism, as with other concepts that look at the modus operandum of a production regime, well, there is a risk of the individual fading into the background. Very easily, if you talk about war capitalism, individuals look like mere puppets of a predefined script of events. They look like, well, they know their role, they know what they need to do, and then they act it out, and that's everything that we need to do about the individuals. Where is individual agency in war capitalism? Well, it seems that Packard was aware of this risk of stressing systemic logics rather than individuals. He zooms into individuals, into special places time and again. And that is one of the great things about his book, that it connects observations on how the system works with what it means for individuals. And he uses some individuals. But I think we can push this further. There is merit in looking more closely at the individuals. And particularly there is merit in looking at these individuals in their entire complexity, in their entire ambiguity. Capitalism is not just there. It is created and recreated by the daily routines of so many people. And that brings in a sense of contingency, a sense of risk, and maybe even a little bit of a sense of moral concern. Yes, these people weren't just acting out capitalism. Every now and then they also thought about the logic and whether they want to be part of this system for the foreseeable future. All this is important because if you write the history of capitalism this way, well, it's not just about something that is there, not just about a system, but it's also about practice, the result of daily behaviors on multiple fronts. And it is about finding ways to make capitalism survive on a daily basis. Becker talks a lot about trade networks and the support from the state, and he talks a lot about labor, but there are other realms where capitalism is created and recreated on a daily basis. There are the farming routines, tilling, sowing, selecting the right seed, finding a fertilizing routine that is both economical and effective. And then there are the ecological challenges. There's very little about that in Becker's book. Even the boll weevil, that we have a wonderful video about from a few months ago, even the boll weevil doesn't really come up a lot. And if you bring in these biological crises, and we bring in the challenges of farming out there in the fields, I think we can write an even more effective history of capitalism as constantly wrestling with crisis on multiple fronts. The history of capitalism is about a constant daily battle to keep capitalism alive in agriculture. Well, when we talk about this kind of history of capitalism, there is one thing that we need to recognize, and we need to depart from the Marxist tradition to talk about the crisis of capitalism. In orthodox Marxism, the crisis of capitalism is both inevitable, but it's just a prelude to the ultimate end, the fall of capitalism in the revolution. Well, we live in the 21st century. We have seen the socialist alternative fade away, and we've seen that capitalism is able to survive and change. It is constantly in crisis, but these crises are not signs of the end. They're just about what capitalism is, making do with a system that counts on the greeds of humans, that rewards the greed of humans. Yes, that is open to moral challenge, but as it stands, it has created a system that managed to survive, not least because it is ever-changing. War capitalism is now a thing of the past. It basically fell with the outcome of the American Civil War, the end of slavery in the United States, though it resonates in a brutalization and a violent regime that is with us to this day. But that is exactly the history of capitalism that we need to write. The history, how it is changing without abandoning completely and moving beyond its roots. Beckett stresses in its conclusion that capitalism is always changing, it is always innovating, it is moving on without solving its fundamental contradictions, and maybe we can write that history even more forcefully if we bring the ecology and if we bring farming practice into this story. And that is what we'll do with the Marmok Project.